For this week, our main focus is going to be on event handling. And up until this point, our event handling has been mainly inline event handling. And what that does is it causes us to embed JavaScript inside of our HTML. And that's problematic in a lot of ways. The main way being, if I was to hand off my website to, let's say, a professional designer, and with the idea that a professional designer is going to remove my programmer art and actually make my site look professional. The more JavaScript that I have embedded inside of that HTML, the more difficult I'm making that job for the designer. Ideally, I'm handing off clean HTML to the designer, and the designer is going to be working in HTML and CSS and hand me something back that looks great. Inline event handlers is kind of one of those sticking points where we're embedding JavaScript within our HTML and we're starting to remove it. And the way we're going to remove it is with event handlers and dynamic event handlers in specific. And really, the videos this week and the content this week is focused on two different ways of handling events. So the first way is what I would consider, I use the term dot notation in the videos, and really what we're talking about there is if I have an object, I can say object dot on click, and I'm talking about that dot notation. And then alternatively, I could use the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C standards compliant version of event handling. And in that mechanism, I would be using the add event listener method to add an event handler. Both are perfectly fine. Both work for different scenarios. So really, that's the gist of what's covered in week 4. So with that, there is some reading. So there's an events overview that's going to link out to the site JavaScript info that covers different browser events. If I go back to week 4, there's some videos that I'm going to ask you to watch. So event handling introduction and then event handling edge cases. So these are a little bit longer videos that cover multiple ways of event handling. So just keep that in mind. And then lastly, your homework for the week is going to be an event handling lab. And the lab itself asks you to handle events using all 3 approaches to event handling. And when I say all 3 approaches, I'm talking about inline events. So I have an event handler embedded in my HTML. The W3C standards compliant event handling, where I'm adding an event listener. And then lastly, the third way I could handle an event is using that dot notation. Okay, so you'll have the event handling lab as homework for this week, and then also the check-in. How's everything going? Things progressing along. Lastly, for this week, I would suggest that you're to the point where you should be significantly along the path of completing the project. So over here on the left, I'm going to jump over to projects, and there's the project 1 details, JavaScript fundamentals, and if I click on the link, the project is a tax calculator. And really, there's a couple of different tax calculations you're going to have. The first is this table is indicating how to calculate federal tax. Next, there's a table indicating how to calculate the state tax for 2020. And lastly, there's, and it's hard to tell that this is actually an image, but there's an image indicating how to calculate the FICA tax, which includes both Social Security and Medicare taxes. And the idea is that the user will enter their gross salary. So let's say their gross salary is $50,000, and then they would click on this Calculate Taxes button, and you'll see the output below. So the example that I'm showing in these 2 screenshots is that a user has entered $30 for their gross pay. They're going to pay 10% federal tax. The state tax comes out to $1.06. And you can see how we're summing up all of these taxes. And it looks like there's a little over $6 in taxes that person would pay. So the total taxes is $636. And then we're taking that total taxes and subtracting it from the gross pay to come up with the net pay. Okay, so I would suggest that some of you may have started the project already, and that's perfectly fine. And you might be thinking, hey, you know, now that I've gotten into the course a little bit and I know dynamic HTML and how to create elements, and now this week we're learning about event handling, maybe I should refactor my code or rewrite my code to incorporate these new things. And what I will tell you is that you can go either way. So if you want to just continue to persist with the code that you have and work through the code you have, that's perfectly acceptable. So I know that you're kind of getting information on the fly. So you might have completed some of the work and used some of the stuff that you knew from the previous semester. You can leave that code in there for project 1. You do not have to rewrite project 1. However, if you haven't started it and you decide that you want to use some of the new code that you've seen in this class, so you want to use dynamic HTML and you want to use dynamic event handlers, I would encourage you to do that, but I'm not going to force you to do it one way or the other. Okay, so don't think that you have to rewrite your entire application in some other way because now you know more. Okay, so if you're significantly along and you just want to complete the project, that's perfectly okay. Okay, so that's it for project 4, or week 4, and kind of just keep me posted if you're running into any concerns or have any questions through either Slack or through the check-ins.